My daughter's casket was white, 16 years old, and they put my baby in a white casket like she was some kind of angel floating home to heaven. And maybe she was. Maybe that's exactly what she was. But me, I was sitting in the front row of my ex-husband's church, watching him stand at that pulpit with tears rolling down his face, telling 3,000 people that I killed her. Not with my hands. No, Raymond was too slick for that. He told them I killed her with my bitterness, with my hatred, with my inability to forgive. He said if Jasmine had lived with him instead of me, she'd still be alive today. The whole church gasped. Women clutched their pearls. Men shook their heads. His new wife, Veronica, grabbed his arm like he needed support just to stand. And me, I just sat there in that front row in my white dress with my grandmother beside me, and I smiled. Not a crazy smile, not a broken smile, a knowing smile. Because Raymond didn't know what I had in my purse. He didn't know that his daughter spent the last 6 months of her life gathering evidence against him. He didn't know she found the financial records, the text messages, the proof of what he really was behind that pastoral robe. He didn't know that she was driving to meet him the night she died. That the last text message she ever sent was to him. That she wrote in her journal, "If anything happens to me, Mom has everything." He didn't know that the detective who investigated her so-called accident was sitting 6 rows behind me, waiting for my signal. And he definitely didn't know that in exactly 47 minutes, when he finished performing his grief for the cameras, I was going to stand at that same pulpit and burn his entire kingdom to the ground. See, Raymond thought he was burying his daughter that day, but what he was really doing was burying himself. He just didn't know it yet. My name is Denise Carter. I'm 38 years old. I was married to Pastor Raymond Mitchell for 11 years, and I've been cleaning up his messes for even longer. But this mess, this was different. This wasn't another affair I had to swallow. This wasn't another lie I had to pretend I believed. This wasn't another Sunday morning smile while my heart was breaking inside. This was my daughter, my only child, my reason for breathing. And he took her from me. Not just took her, he took her and then stood in front of God and everybody and blamed me for losing her. So yes, I smiled. Because that smile was a promise. A promise to my baby girl that her truth was about to come out. A promise to myself that I was done being silent. And a promise to Raymond that his judgment day had finally arrived. If you've ever been blamed for something that wasn't your fault, if you've ever been publicly humiliated by someone who was supposed to love you, if you've ever had to sit still and be quiet while lies were told about you in front of people who believed every word, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you're new because you do not want to miss how this ends. And comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far a mother's justice can reach. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Let me show you how I ended up in that church in that white dress with my daughter in a casket and a bomb in my purse. Let me tell you about the man I married, the daughter I raised, and the truth that refused to stay buried. 19 years ago, I was a different woman. I was 19 years old, working 2 jobs, trying to put myself through community college. My mama had lost herself to addiction when I was 12, and my grandmother raised me from then on. Grandma Catherine, the strongest woman I've ever known. She worked her whole life cleaning other people's houses so I could have a chance at something better. I didn't have much growing up. We had love, we had faith, and we had each other. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hungry for more. Hungry for stability. Hungry for someone to take care of me for once, instead of me always being the one holding everything together. That's when I met Raymond Mitchell. He was 24 years old, finishing up seminary school, working as a youth minister at Greater Hope Baptist Church. The first time I saw him, he was leading a Bible study for young adults, and I swear, that man could make scripture sound like poetry. He was tall, dark-skinned, with a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. When he talked about God's love, you believed it. When he talked about purpose and destiny, you wanted to follow him anywhere. And when he looked at me across that fellowship hall, something in my chest just opened up. I'd never had a man look at me like that before, like I was special, like I mattered, like I was worth pursuing. He started sitting next to me at Bible study. Then he started walking me to my car after service. Then he started calling me at night just to hear about my day. He'd say things like, "Denise, you're different from these other women out here. You got substance, you got depth. God has big plans for you. I ate that up like I was starving, because in a way I was. My grandmother saw through him from the very beginning. I remember coming home one night floating on air because Raymond had asked me to be his girlfriend, and Grandma Catherine looked at me with those sharp eyes of hers and said, "That boy talks real pretty. But watch his hands, baby. They always reaching for something." I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was just being overprotective, old-fashioned, suspicious of any man who came around her granddaughter. So I ignored her. I told myself she didn't understand modern relationships. I told myself Raymond was different. He was a man of God. He was going to be a pastor someday. Men like that don't lie. Men like that don't deceive. I was such a fool. Within 6 months, I was pregnant. Raymond proposed immediately. Got down on one knee in the church parking lot with a ring that was too small but felt like the biggest thing in the world. He talked about building a family together, serving God together, growing old together. The wedding was small, his choice, not mine. He said he wanted to save money for our future, but later I'd find out it was because he had another woman on the side and couldn't risk having too many people in the same room asking questions. We moved into a tiny apartment on the south side of Baltimore. 1 bedroom, barely enough space for both of us, let alone a baby. But I didn't care. I was happy. I was building something. I was finally going to have the family I dreamed about since I was a little girl, watching my mama disappear into her addiction. Raymond was finishing seminary, so he wasn't working much. I kept both my jobs even while pregnant because someone had to pay the rent. He told me it was temporary. Once he got his first pastoral position, everything would change. He'd take care of me. I'd be able to stay home with our baby. We'd have the life we deserved. I believed him. Jasmine came into this world on a Tuesday morning in March. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with her father's eyes and my grandmother's spirit. The moment they put her in my arms, I understood what love really meant. Not the romantic love I thought I had with Raymond. Something deeper, something that came from the very core of my being. I looked at my daughter, and I knew. I would die for this child. I would kill for this child. I would do anything, sacrifice anything, endure anything to make sure she had a good life. Raymond missed the delivery. He said he had a church meeting that ran long, said his phone died, said he tried to get there as fast as he could. By the time he showed up, Jasmine was already 3 hours old, and I had already cried all my tears alone in that hospital bed. He held her for about 10 minutes, took some pictures for his social media, and then said he had to get back to church because they were planning a big event. That was my first real glimpse of who Raymond actually was. But I buried it. I made excuses. I told myself he was under pressure. He was building a ministry. Once things settled down, he'd be more present. Things never settled down. And Raymond never became more present. He was always at church, always networking, always building his brand. He'd come home late exhausted, too tired to help with the baby, too tired to ask about my day, too tired for anything except eating the dinner I cooked and falling into bed. I went back to work 6 weeks after giving birth because we needed the money. I'd drop Jasmine off at my grandmother's house at 5 in the morning, work a full shift, pick her up at 6 in the evening, come home, cook dinner, clean the apartment, take care of the baby all night, and do it all over again the next day. Raymond contributed almost nothing, financially or otherwise. But every Sunday he'd stand in front of that congregation and preach about being a godly husband and father, and people would nod their heads and say amen like he was speaking gospel truth. I sat in those pews with bags under my eyes and a sleeping baby in my arms, and I smiled, because that's what pastors' wives do. They smile, they support, they don't complain, they don't make their husbands look bad. My grandmother would come visit sometimes, and she'd look at me with this sadness in her eyes. She never said, "I told you so." She just held Jasmine and helped me fold laundry and let me cry when I needed to cry. One night after Raymond had been particularly cold, I asked her what I should do. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Baby, some women are married to their husbands, and some women are married to their husbands' dreams. You need to figure out which one you are." I told myself I was both. I told myself that once Raymond's ministry took off, once he got his own church, everything would change. I was investing in our future. I was planting seeds that would bloom later. What I didn't realize was that the only thing blooming was Raymond's ego, and the only thing he was planting was lies. By the time Jasmine was 3 years old, I had started to suspect the truth. Raymond was staying out later and later. His explanations were getting flimsier. His phone was always face down. Women at church would look at me with these strange expressions like they knew something I didn't. But I kept smiling. I kept serving. I kept believing that if I was just a better wife, a better mother, a better supporter of his ministry, everything would work out. I was so busy trying to be good enough that I didn't see the knife until it was already in my back. The first affair I found out about was with the church secretary. Her name was Tanya. Pretty girl, maybe 22, 23. She'd been hired to help with administrative work at the church, and Raymond was responsible for training her. I should have seen it coming. She was young and impressed by him. He was charming and hungry for validation. It was a disaster waiting to happen. But I didn't see it. I was too busy working double shifts, raising a toddler, managing our household on a shoestring budget, while Raymond spent money we didn't have on suits and shoes, because he said appearance mattered for ministry. The way I found out was the worst part. Not from Raymond. Not from any kind of honest confession. From a church mother who pulled me aside after service one Sunday. Her name was Mother Harris, 73 years old, been at that church since before I was born. She looked at me with these kind, sad eyes and said, "Baby, I thought you knew. The way everybody talks about it, I just assumed you knew and had made your peace with it." I didn't know, and I definitely hadn't made my peace with it. I drove home that day with Jasmine in the back seat singing along to some cartoon soundtrack, completely oblivious to the fact that her mother's heart was shattering into 1,000 pieces. When Raymond came home that night, I was waiting for him. Jasmine was asleep. The apartment was quiet, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my hands folded, just looking at him. He knew something was wrong immediately. Guilty people always know. They can smell it in the air. I said one word, "Tanya." And I watched his face go through every stage. Shock, denial, then the calculation. I could literally see him working through his options, trying to figure out what I knew and how to spin it. He tried to lie at first, said Mother Harris was a confused old woman, said Tanya was just a colleague, said I was being paranoid and jealous, and wasn't that a sin too? I sat there and listened to him try to gaslight me in my own kitchen. The audacity of this man. Standing there in the doorway, still smelling like another woman's perfume, telling me I was the problem. Then I pulled out my phone and showed him the text messages I'd found on his iPad. The iPad he left logged in on the coffee table. The iPad that synced with his phone. The messages were explicit. Dates, times, places, pet names he'd never called me, promises he'd never made to me. A whole relationship happening right under my nose while I was changing diapers and working overtime. Raymond's face crumbled. He fell to his knees right there in the kitchen and started crying, begging, saying it was a mistake, saying Satan was testing him, saying he'd been weak but he loved me, only me, and it would never happen again. I wanted to leave him that night. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to pack my bags, take my daughter, and go back to my grandmother's house. But then I thought about Jasmine. About the life I wanted to give her, about the stigma of being a single mother, about what people at church would say, about how Raymond would spin it, how he'd make me look like the bitter ex-wife who couldn't forgive, and God forgive me, I stayed. Raymond promised to go to counseling, promised to be more transparent with his phone, his schedule, his movements, promised that Tanya would be let go and he would never speak to her again. For a while things seemed better. He came home earlier, he helped with Jasmine more. He held my hand in church and looked at me like he used to back when we were dating. I thought maybe we'd survive the worst of it. Maybe this was the wake-up call our marriage needed. That peace lasted about 8 months. The second affair was with a choir member, younger than Tanya, more brazen too. She'd stand right in front of me during worship service singing about God's goodness, knowing full well she'd been in my husband's bed the night before. I found out because she told someone who told someone else, who told my best friend Patricia, who had to sit me down and break my heart all over again. This time, when I confronted Raymond, he didn't cry. He got angry. He told me I wasn't meeting his needs. He told me I was always tired, always working, always focused on Jasmine. He told me a man has requirements, and if his wife can't meet them, he's going to look elsewhere. He actually looked me in the eye and told me that his cheating was my fault. I should have left then. I know that now. But leaving is easier said than done when you're deep in it. when you've built your whole identity around being someone's wife, when you've convinced yourself that your child needs her father, when you're terrified of starting over with nothing. So I stayed. Again. And I made myself smaller. I tried to be more available. I tried to be more attentive. I tried to be whatever Raymond needed me to be so he wouldn't have a reason to look elsewhere. But the truth is, Raymond didn't need a reason. He did what he did because he could, because no one held him accountable, because his congregation thought he was God's gift to ministry, because I kept forgiving him. The years that followed were a blur of suspicions and confrontations and promises and betrayals. Every time I thought we'd reached bottom, Raymond would dig a new basement. And through it all, Jasmine was watching. She was a smart child, observant. She'd hear us arguing at night when she was supposed to be asleep. She'd see me crying in the bathroom when I thought the door was closed. She'd notice when her father missed her dance recitals and birthday parties because he was too busy with church business. She started asking questions. "Mommy, why is Daddy always at church? Mommy, why are you sad? Mommy, does Daddy love us?" I lied to her. I told her everything was fine. I told her Daddy loved us very much. I told her work was just stressful sometimes. I protected Raymond's image to our daughter because I didn't want her to grow up hating her father. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe if I had told her the truth earlier, she wouldn't have gone looking for it herself later. But I was trying to give her a normal childhood. I was trying to keep our family together. I was trying to survive. When Jasmine was 8 years old, Raymond met Veronica. She was 22, a new member of the church, young, beautiful, ambitious. She sang in the choir and served on the hospitality committee and looked at Raymond like he was a celebrity. By then, I knew the pattern. I saw the late nights coming back, the secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in his appearance. Raymond started wearing cologne again, started working out, started caring about things he hadn't cared about in years. And I knew. I knew before he said a word. When he finally sat me down and told me he wanted a divorce, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even sad, not really. By that point, I was just tired, so deeply tired of pretending, of performing, of smiling in church while my marriage was dying at home. But here's what hurt. What really hurt. Raymond didn't just want to leave. He wanted to leave with everything. He wanted the narrative. He wanted to be the good guy. He told me that God was leading him in a different direction. He told me that he'd prayed about it and felt released from our covenant. He told me that I was a good woman, but we'd grown apart and it was time to go our separate ways. And then he went to the congregation and told them the same thing. He painted himself as a man who'd tried everything to save his marriage, but his bitter, unforgiving wife just couldn't move past the past. He didn't mention the affairs. He didn't mention the lies. He didn't mention that he was already sleeping with Veronica before the ink was dry on our separation papers. All anyone knew was that poor Pastor Raymond was going through a difficult divorce and needed the congregation's support during this challenging time. I got almost nothing in the divorce. Raymond had hidden most of our assets in church accounts and investment properties under other people's names. His lawyers were better than anything I could afford. And the judge seemed to think that because Raymond was a pastor, he must be the more trustworthy party. He got the custody arrangement he wanted, every other weekend with Jasmine plus alternating holidays, a schedule he rarely kept because he was always too busy, but on paper, it made him look like an involved father. I got an apartment, some furniture, and full-time responsibility for our daughter with minimal child support that was always late and never enough. And I got my freedom. That was the one thing Raymond couldn't take from me. I walked out of that courthouse with my daughter's hand in mine and my grandmother waiting at the curb. And I didn't look back. Not once. Raymond married Veronica 6 months later. She was 23. He was 35. They had a big wedding at his church, with all the people who used to tell me what a blessing I was to the ministry standing up and clapping for his new beginning. I didn't go. But I heard about it. Everyone made sure I heard about it. And that's when the hardest part of my life began. Not the marriage, the aftermath. Being the ex-wife of a beloved pastor in a community where everyone takes sides, where people whisper when you walk by, where your daughter comes home asking why Daddy has a new family that he actually spends time with. That's when I had to learn who I really was. Not Raymond's wife, not a victim, just Denise, just a mother. just a woman trying to build a life from the wreckage of lies. Being a single mother is hard. Being a single mother while your ex-husband is a famous pastor with a new wife and a whole new family is a special kind of torture. Those first few years after the divorce were survival mode. I worked at the hospital, climbing from medical receptionist to administrative assistant to eventually hospital administrator. Every promotion came from grinding, from staying late, from proving myself over and over again in a world that didn't expect much from a single black mother with a high school diploma and some community college credits. My grandmother was my lifeline. She watched Jasmine whenever I had to work late. She made sure my baby had a warm meal and a loving presence when I couldn't be there. She held me together on the nights when I felt like falling apart. Jasmine was the light of my life. Smart as a whip, curious about everything with this laugh that could fill up a room. She was the best parts of me, and God help me, some of the best parts of Raymond too. His charisma, his ability to connect with people, his quick wit. She had all of that without the darkness underneath. But she had questions. So many questions. Mommy, why doesn't Daddy come to my soccer games? Mommy, why does Daddy take Marcus and David to the zoo but not me? Mommy, why does Daddy's church have pictures of him with his other kids, but not pictures of me? Every question was a knife in my heart, not because I blamed Jasmine for asking, but because I had no good answers. How do you explain to a child that her father sees her as a reminder of a failed first marriage, that he's too busy building a new family to invest in the one he left behind? I never badmouthed Raymond to Jasmine, not once. No matter how much he hurt me, no matter how many times he disappointed her, I refused to be the mother who poisoned her daughter against her father. I would say things like, "Your daddy loves you in his own way," or "Your daddy is very busy with church, but I'm sure he's thinking about you," or "Maybe next time, baby." Looking back, I wonder if I did her a disservice. Maybe if I had been honest about who Raymond really was, she wouldn't have spent so much of her life seeking his approval. Maybe she wouldn't have gone digging for answers herself. But I was trying to protect her. I was trying to let her have her own relationship with her father without my bitterness getting in the way. I was trying to be the bigger person. Raymond's visits were inconsistent at best. He'd show up for his weekends maybe half the time, always with an excuse about why he'd missed the last one. Church conference, ministry obligations, something came up. But when he did show up, he showed up big. Expensive gifts, fancy dinners, photo opportunities that he'd post on his social media with captions like, "Quality time with my princess," and "Being a girl dad is the greatest blessing." Those posts made me sick, not because he was spending time with Jasmine, but because of the performance of it all. He wasn't being a father, he was curating an image. He'd spend 4 hours with her, take 50 pictures, then disappear for 3 weeks. Jasmine started to see through it. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. I remember when she was about 12, she came home from one of her rare weekends at Raymond's house, and she was quiet. Too quiet. I asked her how it was, and she just shrugged. Later that night, I found her crying in her room. She told me that Raymond had taken her to a church event and introduced her to everyone, but the whole time he kept getting distracted, kept talking to other people, kept treating her like a prop instead of his daughter. She said, "Mommy, I don't think Daddy actually wants to spend time with me. I think he just wants people to see him spending time with me." 12 years old, and she'd already figured out what it took me 11 years of marriage to understand. Raymond was all about appearance, about how things looked, the substance, the real connection that was never part of who he was. I held my daughter that night and let her cry, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to force her to maintain a relationship with someone who only wanted her part-time and only for show. If Raymond wanted to be a father, he knew where to find her. But I wasn't going to keep pushing Jasmine towards someone who made her feel like an afterthought. The visits became even less frequent after that. Raymond seemed relieved honestly, less obligation, less disruption to his perfect new life with Veronica and the boys. Meanwhile, I was building something real. My career was growing. I went from assistant to coordinator to manager to director. Every step of the way I thought about Jasmine. Every late night, every extra shift, every sacrifice was for her college fund, for her opportunities, for the life I wanted her to have. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And we had my grandmother who reminded us every Sunday that we were blessed and favored and loved by a God who saw our struggles even when the world didn't. Jasmine grew into an incredible young woman, honor roll every semester, volleyball star with college scouts already looking at her by sophomore year, kind to everyone, even the kids who weren't kind to her. She had this moral compass that just pointed toward good always. She also had this fire in her, this sense of justice. When she saw something wrong, she couldn't just walk past it. She'd speak up, get involved, take action. I used to joke that she was going to be a lawyer or a journalist or something that let her fight for truth. She'd laugh and say, "Maybe I'll just fight for whatever needs fighting for." She had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. Raymond's ministry kept growing during those years. He'd moved on from Greater Hope to planting his own church, New Hope Community, which grew from 100 members to 1,000 to 3,000. He was on TV now, had a radio show, was writing books about marriage and family and godly living. The irony wasn't lost on me. This man who'd cheated on his wife repeatedly, who barely saw his firstborn daughter, who'd built his whole success on the labor and sacrifice of women he'd used and discarded, he was out here being celebrated as a relationship expert. But that's the world we live in, isn't it? Men get to fail upward, especially charming men, especially men in positions of spiritual authority. They get second chances and third chances and infinite chances, while the women they hurt are expected to stay quiet and heal privately and never make a scene. I could have made a scene. I could have gone to the media with what I knew, could have blown up his ministry and exposed him for who he really was. But I didn't, because I had Jasmine to think about, and I didn't want her to be known as the daughter of the pastor who got publicly exposed. I didn't want her to carry that weight, so I stayed silent. I focused on my life. I raised my daughter, and I let Raymond keep building his empire of lies. I thought that was the end of our story. I thought we'd just continue on parallel tracks forever, him in his spotlight, and me in my quiet corner, until Jasmine was grown and gone, and I didn't have to think about him anymore. But life had other plans. Because 6 months before she died, my daughter decided she was done waiting for her father to love her on his own. She decided to go looking for answers, and what she found changed everything. 6 months before my daughter was buried in a white casket, something changed in her. Jasmine was 16, a junior in high school doing everything right. Her grades were excellent. Her volleyball team was headed to state. College recruiters were already reaching out. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed for it, was all coming together. And then she started asking about her father. Not the usual questions, not, "Why doesn't Daddy call?" or "When will I see him next?" Different questions, deeper questions. "Mom, when you and Daddy were married, did he handle the church finances? Mom, do you know anything about Daddy's investments? Mom, did Daddy ever talk about people at church who gave him money?" I didn't understand where this was coming from. Jasmine had always been curious, but this felt specific, pointed, like she was looking for something. I asked her why she wanted to know. She shrugged and said it was for a school project about nonprofit organizations. I believed her because I had no reason not to. What I didn't know was that Raymond had suddenly started reaching out to her. After years of minimal contact, years of missed birthdays and broken promises, Raymond was suddenly interested in being a father. He was texting her regularly, inviting her to church events, posting about her on his social media again. Jasmine was cautiously excited. She wanted so badly to have a relationship with her father. She wanted him to love her the way he seemed to love his sons with Veronica. She wanted to matter to him. So when he invited her to spend more time at his church, she said yes. When he asked her to help with some administrative tasks during the summer, she jumped at the chance. She thought he was finally seeing her, finally valuing her. She didn't realize he was using her. I noticed changes in Jasmine over those months. She was on her phone more, but secretive about who she was talking to. She started locking her laptop, which she'd never done before. She'd go quiet sometimes, staring off into space like she was working through something heavy in her mind. But she was a teenager. Teenagers get moody. Teenagers keep secrets. I gave her space because I wanted to respect her privacy. I trusted her because she'd never given me a reason not to. About 3 weeks before the accident, she came home from one of her visits to Raymond's church, and she was different. Not just quiet, disturbed, like she'd seen something that shook her. I found her in her room, sitting on the bed, just staring at the wall. I sat down next to her and asked what was wrong. She didn't answer for a long time. Then she turned to me and said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" What really happened between you and Daddy? Not the Sunday school version. The truth. My heart dropped. I'd spent 8 years protecting her from the truth, and now she was asking for it directly. I took a breath and I told her. Not everything, but enough. I told her about the affairs, about the lies, about the way he controlled our finances and manipulated our image, about the way he left me with nothing and took the narrative with him. Jasmine listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly, like pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. "I knew it," she said. "I knew something was wrong with him." She wouldn't tell me what she meant. She said she wasn't ready yet. She needed to be sure. She needed to gather more information. I should have pushed harder. I should have demanded to know what she'd found. But she was so determined, so sure of herself, and I didn't want to be the mother who didn't trust her daughter's judgment. 2 weeks before she died, Jasmine told me she'd discovered something about her father. Something bad. Something that could destroy him if it got out. I was scared. I asked her what she meant, what she'd found, what she was planning to do. She said, "Mom, I'm going to expose him. I'm going to show everyone who he really is. He's been lying to all those people for years. He's been taking their money and using it for himself. And there's something else. Something worse. But I need more proof." I tried to talk her out of it. I told her that going against Raymond was dangerous, that he had power and connections, that she was just 16 and this was too big for her to handle alone. But Jasmine looked at me with those determined eyes, her father's eyes, and she said, "Mom, you spent 11 years being quiet. You spent 8 years protecting me from the truth. And what did it get you? He's still out there pretending to be something he's not, hurting people. Someone has to stop him." I didn't have an answer for that, because she was right. My silence hadn't protected anyone. It had just given Raymond more time to build his empire of lies. So I made her promise me something. I made her promise that she wouldn't do anything without talking to me first, that if she found something serious, she'd come to me and we'd figure out together how to handle it. She promised. She looked me in the eye and promised. She broke that promise. The night Jasmine died started like any other evening. I came home from work around 6. Jasmine was in her room doing homework. We ate dinner together, talked about her volleyball game coming up that weekend, made plans for her birthday the following month. Around 9, she said she was tired and was going to bed early. I kissed her forehead and told her I loved her. She said she loved me too. That was the last normal moment of my life. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Jasmine. Her voice sounded strange, tight, like she was trying to stay calm, but something was very wrong. "Mom, I love you," she said. "No matter what happens, remember that I love you." I sat up in bed, my heart already racing. "Baby, what's wrong? What's happening?" "I can't explain right now," she said. "But I need you to know that if anything happens to me, everything is on my laptop. The password is your birthday and Grandma's birthday together. Promise me you'll check it if something happens." I was fully panicking now. "Jasmine, you're scaring me. Where are you? What are you talking about?" "I have to go," she said. "I'll explain everything tomorrow. I promise. I love you, Mom." And she hung up. I tried calling her back. 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. No answer. I called Raymond's house, but Veronica answered and said Jasmine wasn't there and she didn't know what I was talking about. I called the police, but they said she hadn't been missing long enough to file a report. I stayed up all night pacing, praying, bargaining with God to bring my baby home safe. At 1:47 in the morning, my phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Jasmine. It was the hospital. They said there had been an accident. Single vehicle. A car had hit a tree on Miller Road about 3 miles from Raymond's church. The driver was a teenage girl. She'd been pronounced dead at the scene. They needed me to come in and identify the body. I don't remember driving to the hospital. I don't remember walking through those doors. I don't remember anything until I was standing in a cold room looking at my daughter's face so peaceful she could have been sleeping except for the bruises and the cuts and the absolute stillness of her chest. My baby, my Jasmine, my reason for breathing, gone. The police said it was an accident. They said she must have been driving too fast, lost control on a curve, hit the tree. Case closed. But nothing about that night made sense to me. Why was Jasmine driving at 1 a.m? She was supposed to be in bed. Why was she on Miller Road? That road led to Raymond's church and Raymond's neighborhood. Why did she call me and say, if anything happens to me? What was she going to explain tomorrow? And why? When I finally got home and cried myself into a stupor, did I wake up to a text message on my phone from a number I didn't recognize that said only, "Your daughter was trying to tell the truth. Don't let them silence her." The police called it an accident. They closed the case within 2 weeks. But I'm Jasmine's mother. I knew my daughter. She didn't drive recklessly. She didn't go out alone at night. She didn't take risks without reason. Something happened that night. Someone made sure my daughter never got to tell her truth, and sitting in my living room, destroyed by grief, but refusing to be destroyed completely, I made a decision. If the police wouldn't find out what happened to my baby, I would. If the world was content to call it an accident and move on, I would dig until I found the real story. If my daughter died trying to expose her father, I would finish what she started. I just had to find her evidence first, and that meant cracking open her laptop and discovering exactly what Jasmine had found that was worth killing for. So that's how Act 1 of my story ends. Not with a mother at peace, but with a mother at war. Not with closure, but with questions. Not with grief alone, but with grief transformed into purpose. My daughter was murdered. I don't have proof yet. But I have her words. I have her warnings. I have a lifetime of knowing who Raymond really is beneath his pastoral smile. And I have 6 months to prepare for his reckoning. Because Raymond is planning a big memorial service for Jasmine at his church, 6 months after her death. A public spectacle where he'll cry and pray and collect donations for a scholarship fund in her name. He thinks it's going to be his redemption tour, his chance to rewrite history one more time. But he's wrong. That memorial is going to be his judgment day. He just doesn't know it yet. The first month after Jasmine died, I didn't feel like a person anymore. I felt like a ghost walking through someone else's life, going through motions that didn't mean anything. I woke up every morning forgetting she was gone. Just for a second. Just long enough to call out her name and ask if she wanted pancakes for breakfast. And then the silence would hit me, and the remembering would crush my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. Her room was exactly how she left it. Volleyball trophies on the shelf, posters on the wall, clothes on the chair that she meant to hang up but never did. Her laptop sitting on the desk, closed, password protected, holding secrets I wasn't ready to face. I couldn't touch anything, couldn't move anything, because moving her things meant admitting she was never coming back to use them. My grandmother moved in with me that first week. She didn't ask. She just showed up with a suitcase and started cooking. She'd lost a granddaughter too, but she put her grief aside to hold mine. That's the kind of woman she is. The kind of woman who keeps standing even when the ground is falling out from under her. Patricia came by every day after her shift at the hospital. She'd sit with me even when I couldn't talk. She'd hold my hand even when I couldn't feel it. She'd cry with me even when I couldn't cry anymore because the tears had run dry. The funeral happened fast, too fast, and I had no control over any of it. Raymond insisted on handling everything. He wanted it at his church New Hope community because that's where his congregation was. He wanted to officiate because he was her father. He wanted to control the narrative because that's what Raymond does. I was too broken to fight him, too shattered to argue. I just nodded when people asked me questions and signed whatever papers they put in front of me. My daughter was dead. What did any of it matter? The funeral was a spectacle. 3,000 people packed into that sanctuary, camera crews from local news stations, politicians and community leaders in the front rows, gospel choir singing songs that Jasmine never even liked. Raymond stood at that pulpit in his expensive suit, tears streaming down his face, and he performed grief like he was auditioning for an Oscar. He talked about his precious daughter, about how much he loved her, about how he would give anything to have her back. He didn't mention that he'd barely seen her in the past 3 years, didn't mention that he missed her 16th birthday because he was at a conference in Miami, didn't mention that when she called him for advice about colleges, he told her he was too busy and would call back and then never did. But he cried. Oh, how he cried. And the congregation wept with him, and Veronica rubbed his back, and his sons, who barely knew their half-sister, sat in the front row, looking uncomfortable in their little suits. And where was I? The woman who actually raised Jasmine, the mother who worked double shifts to pay for her volleyball camps and her SAT tutors and her dreams. I was in the third row. Third row off to the side like an afterthought, like a distant relative instead of the woman who carried her for 9 months and held her hand through every fever and heartbreak for 16 years. Nobody comforted me. Nobody asked how I was doing. Everyone was too busy crowding around Raymond, telling him how sorry they were, asking what they could do to support him during this difficult time. I sat there invisible while my ex-husband collected sympathy for a child he'd abandoned. That was the first funeral, the public one, Raymond's production. I had my own ceremony later. Just me, my grandmother Patricia, and a few of Jasmine's real friends. We went to the cemetery after everyone else had left. We stood at her grave and told stories about who she really was. We laughed about the time she tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner and almost burned down the kitchen. We cried about all the things she'd never get to do. That was the funeral that mattered. The quiet one. The true one. But the questions wouldn't leave me alone. Late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd replay Jasmine's last phone call in my head. The way she said, "I love you," like she was saying goodbye. The way she told me to check her laptop if anything happened. The way her voice sounded tight and scared but determined. She knew something was wrong. She knew she might be in danger. And she went anyway. Why? What was so important that she would risk her safety? And where was she going at 1 a.m. on a road that led straight to her father's church? The official report said it was an accident, said she was driving too fast, said she lost control on a curve. Case closed. Condolences offered move on with your life, but I couldn't move on because nothing about that night made sense. Jasmine was a careful driver. She'd only had her license for 6 months, and she treated that car like it was made of glass. She never went over the speed limit. She checked her mirrors obsessively. She wouldn't even change the radio station while the car was moving because she was afraid of getting distracted. This was not a girl who drove recklessly. This was not a girl who took curves too fast. And she had no reason to be out. She told me she was going to bed. Her phone records showed she was home at 10 o'clock. So what happened between 10 and 1 a.m. that made her get in her car and drive toward Raymond's neighborhood? I kept coming back to her words. If anything happens to me, everything is on my laptop. She knew. She knew something might happen. And she wanted to make sure I could find the truth, even if she couldn't tell me herself. My grandmother was the one who finally pushed me to act. About 3 weeks after the funeral, she sat me down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and looked at me with those sharp eyes that had seen everything life could throw at a person. She said, "Baby, I raised you. I raised your mama before she got lost, and I helped you raise that beautiful girl we just buried. So I know you better than you know yourself sometimes." I didn't say anything. I just waited. She continued, "You've been walking around here like a zombie, and I understand. Grief takes what it takes. But I also see something else in you. I see questions. I see doubt. I see a mother who don't believe what they told her about how her child died." Tears started rolling down my face. I hadn't said any of this out loud to anyone, but my grandmother saw it anyway. "Your mama was sick," she said. "She couldn't see truth even when it was standing right in front of her. But you got my eyes. You always did. And my eyes are telling me something ain't right about how that child died." She reached across the table and took my hands. "So here's what I need to know. You gonna let them bury the truth with her, or you gonna do what a mother does and find out what really happened to your baby?" I looked at my grandmother, 76 years old, buried a husband, buried a daughter to addiction, now buried a great-granddaughter, still standing, still fighting, still refusing to accept lies as truth. And something in me shifted. The numbness cracked. The fog lifted. And underneath all that grief, I felt something else rising up. Anger. Purpose. Determination. "No," I said. "I'm not going to let them bury the truth." My grandmother nodded like she'd been waiting for that answer. "Good," she said. "Then it's time to open that laptop." I sat in Jasmine's room for an hour before I could bring myself to touch the laptop. Everything smelled like her. That vanilla lotion she loved, the slight mustiness of volleyball gear she kept meaning to wash, the lavender candle on her nightstand that she lit when she was studying. My grandmother sat in the hallway close enough to hear me if I needed her far enough to give me privacy. Patricia had wanted to come, but I needed to do this alone first. Whatever Jasmine had found, whatever secrets she'd been keeping, I needed to be the first one to see them. The laptop was silver-covered in stickers, volleyball quotes, inspirational messages, a picture of her and me from last summer at the beach. I ran my fingers over that sticker and tried to breathe through the pain. Then I opened it. The password screen glowed at me. Jasmine had told me what it was, my birthday and my grandmother's birthday together. I typed it in slowly, like I was unlocking something sacred. The desktop appeared. Jasmine's usual chaos of files and folders and screenshots scattered everywhere, but there in the center was one folder she'd never had before. It was labeled "For Mom." My hands were shaking as I clicked on it. Inside were more folders organized with a precision that surprised me. Jasmine was never this organized. Whatever this was, it mattered enough for her to do it right. The first folder was labeled Dad's Church Finances. I opened it, and my heart stopped. Screenshots. Dozens of screenshots. Bank statements and transfer records and tax documents I didn't even know existed. Raymond's church handled millions of dollars in donations every year, and according to these records, a significant chunk of that money was going places it shouldn't. There were transfers to personal accounts, purchases of properties listed under Veronica's maiden name, payments to shell companies that didn't seem to do anything except receive money and then send it somewhere else. My daughter had found evidence that Raymond was embezzling from his own congregation. I'm not a financial expert, but even I could see what these documents meant. Over $300,000, maybe more, funneled away from the church building fund, the missionary fund, the community outreach programs. Money that good, faithful people had given to serve God's purpose was lining Raymond's pockets instead. I thought about all those church members, the elderly women on fixed incomes who gave from their Social Security checks, the single mothers who tithed even when they couldn't afford groceries, the working men who donated overtime earnings because they believed in the ministry. Raymond had stolen from them, and my daughter had the proof. The second folder was labeled The Women. I hesitated before opening it. I knew Raymond was a cheater. I'd lived through his affairs, but whatever Jasmine had found was bad enough that she'd felt the need to document it. I clicked. More screenshots, text messages this time, explicit messages between Raymond and multiple women. Not just one affair, not just two. At least 3 different women that I could identify from the messages. All current. All happening while he stood in that pulpit every Sunday preaching about the sanctity of marriage. But it was the last set of messages that made my blood run cold. The contact name was DW, and the profile picture was a young face, a very young face. I scrolled through the messages and I felt sick to my stomach. Raymond was communicating with a teenager. The messages made references to her age, to her high school, to keeping their relationship secret from her parents. There were photos. Not explicit ones, thank God, but photos that no 43-year-old man should be receiving from a girl that young. There was a note from Jasmine attached to this file. It said, "Her name is Destiny Williams. She's 17. She goes to Valley High. I met her at Dad's church youth group. She's scared, but I'm trying to help her. Dad has been mentoring her for 2 years. We all know what that means." Raymond wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't just a thief. He was a predator. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely scroll anymore. But there was another folder. One labeled, My Plan. Inside were journal entries. Jasmine's own words written over the past few months. The first entry was dated 4 months before her death. I decided to give Dad another chance. He's been reaching out a lot lately, saying he wants to be more involved in my life. Mom says people can change. I don't know if I believe that, but I want to believe it. I want to have a father. Is that so wrong? The entries progressed, and I watched my daughter's hope turn to horror. Dad asked me to help organize files at the church office. I said yes because I wanted to spend time with him, but he's barely there. He just leaves me alone with access to everything. I don't think he realizes how much I can see. Found something strange in the financial records. Money going to accounts that don't match any church programs. I'm going to dig deeper. It's worse than I thought. So much worse. He's been stealing. For years. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. How could he do this? These people trust him. Met a girl at youth group named Destiny. She seems sad. Something about the way she looks at Dad makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to try to talk to her. Destiny told me everything. I can't stop crying. My father is a monster. He's been hurting this girl since she was 15, and she's not the only one. There were others before her. She knows their names. I have to do something. I can't let him keep hurting people. I can't let him keep stealing from the church. But who would believe me? He's Pastor Raymond Mitchell. Everybody loves him. I'm gathering evidence. Everything I can find. When I have enough, I'm going to expose him. At his church anniversary service, in front of everyone, they need to know who he really is. I told him I know, about the money, about Destiny, about all of it. I told him he has 1 week to confess or I'm going public. He laughed at me. He said no one would believe a bitter teenager whose mother poisoned her against him. We'll see about that. The last entry was dated the day she died. Dad wants to meet tonight. He says he's ready to talk. He says he wants to work something out. I don't trust him, but I'm going anyway. I need to look him in the eye and tell him what he's done. I need him to know that his time is up. I'm bringing my phone to record everything. If anything goes wrong, Mom, I love you. Check the cloud backup. Everything is there. Don't let him win. I sat there staring at those words until the screen blurred from my tears. My daughter had confronted a predator, alone, at night, because she believed in justice more than she feared for her safety. And now she was dead. The final folder was labeled The Night. I opened it and found the text exchange between Jasmine and Raymond from the night she died. Jasmine: I know everything, Dad. About the money, about the women, about Destiny Williams. She's 17. Do you understand what that means? What you've been doing is a crime. Raymond: We need to talk, in person, tonight. Jasmine: I'm not scared of you. Raymond: Jasmine: I'm your father. I love you. Let's work this out together before you do something you can't take back. Jasmine: Work it out. You've been stealing from your church and grooming teenage girls, and you want to work it out, Raymond. Come to the church, alone. We can figure out a solution that works for everyone. Jasmine: Fine. But if anything happens to me, Mom has everything. I mean it. Everything. Raymond: Nothing's going to happen. You're my daughter. I love you. The last text from Jasmine was simple. On my way. Timestamp 11:47 p.m. Her accident was reported at 1:23 a.m. What happened in those hours? She left the house before midnight. The accident wasn't until almost 1:30. Where was she during that time? What happened after she got to the church? I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my daughter's room. Everything made sense now. The questions she'd been asking, the distance in her eyes, the determination that had taken over her in those final weeks. Jasmine died trying to do what I never had the courage to do. She died trying to expose her father for what he really was, and I was going to make sure her death wasn't in vain. I picked up my phone and called Patricia. I need you to come over, I said, and bring Angela. We need to have a meeting. I found something. Patricia's voice was cautious. What kind of something? I looked at the laptop, at the folders, at the evidence my 16-year-old daughter had compiled against a monster. The kind of something that's going to bring Raymond Mitchell down. But I'm going to need help. My sister circle came through like they always do. Patricia showed up within the hour, still in her nursing scrubs, with Angela right behind her. My grandmother made coffee while I spread the printouts across the kitchen table. Everything from Jasmine's laptop, the financial records, the text messages, the journal entries, the evidence of Raymond's true nature laid out like exhibits at a trial. Patricia's face went through every emotion as she read: shock, disgust, horror. By the time she got to the messages about Destiny Williams, she had to walk away and stand by the window, her shoulders shaking. Angela was quieter. She's a teacher, and I could see her processing this information through that lens. How many girls at her school might be going through something similar? How many predators were hiding behind respectable positions? When they'd both finished reading, we sat in silence for a long moment. Patricia spoke first. "Denise, this is enough to put him in prison. Why didn't you take this to the police already?" I shook my head. "The police already closed the case. They said it was an accident. They're not going to reopen it just because his ex-wife shows up with files from a laptop. Raymond has connections in this city, connections in the department. They'll say I fabricated everything out of bitterness." "Then what's the plan?" Angela asked. I'd been thinking about this since I closed the laptop, thinking about Jasmine's last journal entry, about the church anniversary service, about exposing Raymond in front of everyone. My daughter wanted to bring him down publicly. She wanted to stand in his church and tell everyone who he really was. She didn't get that chance, but maybe I can finish what she started. My grandmother's voice came from the doorway. "That man is dangerous, baby. Look what happened to Jasmine when she confronted him. You go after him directly, he might do the same to you." Then I need to be smarter than she was. I need more evidence. I need witnesses. And I need to understand exactly what happened the night she died. Patricia leaned forward. "What about the detective who handled the case? Have you talked to him?" I hadn't. After the police closed the case, I'd been too broken to push back. But now I had a reason to push. "I'm going to reach out to him," I said. "See if there's anything he noticed that didn't make it into the official report." Angela pulled out her phone. "And I can help with the school angle. If Destiny Williams goes to Valley High, I might be able to find out more about her situation. Carefully, without tipping anyone off." We spent the next hour making a plan. Who would do what information we needed, how we would proceed without alerting Raymond that we were investigating. My grandmother blessed us before we dispersed. Her hands on our heads, her voice calling down protection and guidance. She prayed for justice. She prayed for truth. And she prayed for Jasmine's soul to rest easy, knowing her mother was going to fight for her. 3 days later, I met with Detective Marcus Webb. He was the investigator who'd been assigned to Jasmine's accident. I'd called his office and said I had new information. He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown off the record. Detective Webb was a black man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a cautious demeanor. He listened as I told him why I was there, about the laptop, about the evidence, about my belief that my daughter's death was not an accident. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, stirring his coffee even though he'd already stirred it a dozen times. "Mrs. Carter," he said finally, "I need to tell you something, off the record." I nodded. He looked around the coffee shop, making sure no one was listening. "When I investigated your daughter's accident, something didn't sit right with me. The physical evidence was strange. The way her car hit that tree, the angle, the speed, it didn't match what a typical loss of control would look like." My heart was pounding. "What do you mean?" I ordered a more thorough examination of the vehicle. What I found was that her brake line had been partially cut, not all the way through, just enough that it would fail under stress, at high speed, on a curve. I couldn't breathe. "You're telling me someone sabotaged her car?" Detective Webb nodded slowly. "That's what I believed. I wrote it up in my report and submitted it to my supervisor. 3 days later, I was called into the captain's office and told that my findings were inconclusive, that I should close the case as an accident and move on." Why would they do that? I asked the same question. The answer I got was that Pastor Raymond Mitchell is a prominent community leader, that his daughter's death was already a tragedy, that suggesting foul play without concrete proof would only cause more pain for the family. The anger rising in me was unlike anything I'd felt before. They covered it up. They knew something was wrong, and they covered it up because of who he is. "I can't prove that," Webb said carefully. "But I can tell you that I was transferred off the case that same day, reassigned to traffic enforcement. Someone wanted me to stop asking questions." I pulled out the folder of evidence from Jasmine's laptop. "What if I could give you proof? What if I could show you why someone might have wanted my daughter dead?" Detective Webb looked at the folder for a long moment. Then he met my eyes. I've been waiting for someone to come forward. I couldn't pursue this on my own without evidence, without a victim's family pushing for answers, but with what you might have with your cooperation, we might be able to build a real case. I handed him the folder. Everything my daughter found is in there. Financial fraud, sexual misconduct with a minor, and his text messages with her the night she died asking her to meet him alone at the church. Webb flipped through the pages, his expression growing darker with each one. "This is significant," he said, "but it's not enough for a murder charge. We need more. We need witnesses. We need physical evidence tying him to the scene. We need the girl Destiny Williams to corroborate the abuse." "Then let's get it," I said. "Whatever it takes. I have time. I have resources. And I have something Raymond doesn't know I have." "What's that?" "Patience. He thinks he got away with it. He thinks my daughter's secrets died with her. He has no idea what's coming." Detective Webb closed the folder and looked at me with something like respect in his eyes. "Mrs. Carter, I have to warn you. Going after a man like Raymond Mitchell is dangerous. He has money influence connections. If he finds out you're investigating him, there's no telling what he might do." I thought about my daughter, 16 years old, brave enough to confront a monster, brave enough to gather evidence against her own father, brave enough to walk into that darkness alone. "My daughter wasn't afraid of him," I said. "And neither am I. But this time, I'm going to be smart about it. I'm going to build a case so solid he can't talk his way out of it. And then I'm going to expose him in front of the same people he's been lying to for years." Detective Webb nodded slowly. "All right, let's work together. But we do this carefully. By the book as much as possible. And you don't confront him directly no matter what you find. You bring everything to me first. Agreed?" "Agreed." We shook hands across the table. An unlikely alliance, a grieving mother and a sideline detective both looking for the same thing, justice for Jasmine. Finding Destiny Williams was harder than I expected. Angela had confirmed that a girl by that name had attended Valley High School, but had dropped out 3 months ago, right around the time Jasmine died. That couldn't be a coincidence. I tracked down her family's address through some creative research. They lived in a working-class neighborhood on the east side of the city, small houses, chain-link fences, the kind of place where people minded their own business because they had enough of their own problems. I went alone. I didn't want to overwhelm her, didn't want to seem like a threat. Her mother answered the door, a tired woman in her late 40s with suspicious eyes that had seen too much disappointment. When I said I was Jasmine Carter's mother, her expression shifted from suspicion to something like pain. "Destiny's not here," she said. "She barely leaves her room anymore. What do you want?" I kept my voice gentle. "Mrs. Williams, I think your daughter knows something about what happened to mine." "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to understand." She studied me for a long moment, then stepped aside to let me in. Destiny was in a back bedroom sitting on a bed with her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked young, so young, 17 years old but with eyes that seemed much older, eyes that had seen things no child should see. When she saw me, she started crying before I said a word. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry about Jasmine. She was trying to help me, and now she's gone because of me." I sat down on the edge of the bed, careful not to get too close, and waited for her to continue. The story she told me broke my heart all over again. Raymond had started paying special attention to Destiny when she was 15. New to the church, from a struggling family, looking for guidance and stability. He was the pastor, the father figure she'd never had. At first it was just conversations, mentoring sessions, small gifts. Then it became more. Private meetings, texts late at night, pressure to keep their relationship secret, manipulation disguised as love. By the time she realized what was happening, she was in too deep to know how to get out. And then Jasmine noticed her at youth group, noticed the way Destiny looked at Raymond, noticed the sadness that never quite left her eyes. Jasmine had befriended her, earned her trust, and eventually Destiny had told her everything. "Jasmine was the first person who believed me," Destiny said through her tears. "The first person who said it wasn't my fault. She was so angry. She said she was going to stop him. She said she was going to make sure he never hurt anyone else. What happened the night she died? I asked. Destiny's face went pale. Jasmine called me that evening. She said she'd confronted her father, told him she had evidence and was going to expose him at the church anniversary. She said he wanted to meet with her to talk about it. And you told her not to go. I begged her not to go. I told her he was dangerous. I told her what he'd said to me before about making problems disappear. But she said she wasn't afraid of him. She said she had to look him in the eye and tell him his time was up. Destiny started sobbing harder. That's the last time I talked to her. A few hours later, she was dead. I took Destiny's hand in mine. Did you see Raymond that night? Did you see anything that could help prove what happened? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. I was at the church that night. I sometimes slept in my car in the parking lot when things got bad at home. I saw Jasmine's car pull in around midnight, and I saw Pastor Mitchell's car was already there. The lights were on in his office. My heart was racing. What happened next? I was going to go check on her, make sure she was okay. But before I could, I saw them come out of the church together, Jasmine and Pastor Mitchell. They were arguing. He was grabbing her arm. She was trying to pull away. Then what? Destiny's voice dropped to a whisper. He said something to her. I couldn't hear what. But she stopped fighting. She got in her car and drove away, and a few minutes later Pastor Mitchell got in his car and drove the same direction she went. He followed her. I think so. His car came back about an hour and a half later. I was still there, too scared to move. When he got out, he looked, I don't know, disheveled, agitated. He went straight to the back of the church where the water hookup is, and the next morning when I woke up, he was washing his car at 4 a.m. I sat back trying to process what she was telling me. Raymond had met with Jasmine at the church. They'd argued. She'd left. He'd followed her, and then he'd come back and washed his car in the middle of the night. It wasn't proof. It wasn't enough for a conviction, but it was a witness. It was a timeline. And combined with everything else, it was building towards something. Destiny, I said carefully, would you be willing to tell the police what you just told me about Raymond, about what happened that night, about everything? She looked terrified. He said if I ever talked, he'd destroy my family. He said nobody would believe me anyway. He said he'd make sure I regretted it for the rest of my life. I took both her hands in mine and looked into her eyes. Jasmine tried to protect you. She died trying to expose the man who hurt you. If we don't speak up, he's going to keep doing this, to other girls, to more families. Raymond Mitchell needs to be stopped, and you're one of the only people who can help make that happen. The fear in her eyes was real, but so was something else, something that looked like the beginning of courage. Jasmine was my friend, she said quietly. She believed me when no one else did. If telling the truth can help get justice for her, then I'll do it. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of letting him win. I hugged her then. This broken girl who'd been victimized by the same man who was supposed to protect her, who was supposed to be a man of God. You're not alone anymore, I told her. I'm going to make sure he pays for everything he did. To you, to Jasmine, to everyone. Destiny nodded against my shoulder, and I felt something shifting. The case was building. The pieces were coming together. Raymond thought he was untouchable, thought his position and his reputation made him invincible. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next 3 months were the longest and the shortest of my life. Every day I woke up with one purpose: build the case, find more evidence, prepare for what was coming. Every night I went to sleep with Jasmine's face in my mind, promising her that I was getting closer. Detective Webb became my partner in this quiet war. He couldn't officially reopen the investigation, not without permission from his superiors, but he could work the case on his own time, and he was as hungry for justice as I was. Together we built a file that grew thicker by the week. We got the original inspection report from Jasmine's car, the one that noted the partially cut brake line before it was buried and reclassified as inconclusive. We got photos of the cut, expert analysis confirming it was deliberate, not accidental wear. We pulled Raymond's cell phone records from that night. His phone pinged off a tower near the accident site at 1:15 a.m., 8 minutes before the crash was reported. He'd told investigators he was home in bed at that time. The cell records proved he was lying. We obtained security footage from a gas station a half-mile from the church. It showed Raymond's car heading in the same direction as Jasmine's at 12:17 a.m. 2 minutes after Destiny said she saw them leave. We found the car wash receipt. Raymond's credit card at an all-night car wash at 4:23 a.m. Who washes their car at 4 in the morning? Someone who needs to get rid of evidence. We tracked down Raymond's first wife, the one nobody knew about. He'd been married before me for 2 years to a woman named Monica, who now lived in Philadelphia. She'd refused to talk at first, but when I flew up there and showed her what we'd found, she opened up. Raymond had been violent with her, controlling, abusive. She'd left in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on her back because she was afraid for her life. He'd threatened to destroy her if she ever told anyone, so she'd stayed silent for 20 years. "I've been waiting for this day," she told me, tears in her eyes. "I've been waiting for someone to finally see him for what he is. I'll testify. I'll tell everything." We found 3 other women from his congregation who were willing to talk about their inappropriate relationships with the pastor. All of them had been pressured into silence. All of them were relieved to finally have someone who believed them. Minister Thompson, Raymond's associate pastor, agreed to help from the inside. He'd been uncomfortable with Raymond's leadership for years, but had never had the courage to act. When I showed him the evidence of the embezzlement, he broke down. "I suspected," he admitted. "I asked questions about the finances and got shut down every time. He made me feel like I was being faithless to question him." Minister Thompson gave us access to the church's real financial records, the ones Raymond didn't know he could access. They showed a pattern of theft going back almost a decade. Raymond had stolen over $500,000 from his own congregation. Patricia worked her hospital connections to get Jasmine's complete medical records from that night. The autopsy report showed injuries consistent with the crash, but there was something else: bruising on her arms that didn't match impact injuries. Defensive wounds the medical examiner had noted, but then crossed out and changed to consistent with steering wheel contact. Someone had altered the autopsy report. Someone with enough influence to pressure a medical examiner into changing his findings. Angela kept an eye on Destiny, making sure she was safe, making sure she didn't waver. The girl was getting stronger every day. The more she talked about what Raymond had done to her, the less power he had over her. And through it all, my grandmother prayed. Every morning and every night she got down on her knees and asked the Lord for justice, for protection, for the strength to see this through. "God sees everything," she'd tell me. "Every secret, every lie, every sin that man tried to hide. And God don't let the wicked prosper forever. Their judgment always comes. We're just helping it along." By the time 5 months had passed, we had enough evidence to potentially charge Raymond with fraud, sexual misconduct, with a minor, and obstruction of justice. The murder charge was harder. We had motive. We had opportunity. We had circumstantial evidence. But we didn't have a confession. We didn't have a witness who saw him cut those brake lines. Detective Webb was working with the district attorney's office, trying to build a case strong enough to prosecute. But these things took time. And Raymond was still out there preaching every Sunday, living his best life, completely unaware that walls were closing in. Then the announcement came. Raymond's church posted on social media that they were hosting a special memorial service for Jasmine on the 6-month anniversary of her death, a celebration of her life, a time for the community to come together and remember. And they were launching the Jasmine Carter Mitchell Scholarship Fund, $100,000 to help young women pursue their education. $100,000, probably stolen from the same church members he was pretending to serve. The memorial service was going to be a major event, media coverage, local politicians, a packed sanctuary. Raymond was planning to use my daughter's death to rehabilitate his image, to remind everyone what a devoted father he was. When I saw that announcement, something clicked into place. This was the moment, the stage I'd been waiting for. The same platform Jasmine had planned to use for her exposure. I called Detective Webb. "The memorial service," I said. "That's where we do it." He was cautious. "Denise, we're not ready for an arrest yet. The DA is still reviewing everything." "I'm not talking about an arrest. I'm talking about exposure. Raymond is going to stand up in front of thousands of people and perform grief for my daughter. I want to be there when the performance ends. I want to show them who he really is. That could be dangerous. If you go public before we're ready to charge him, he could flee. He could destroy evidence. He could retaliate. I thought about Jasmine, about her journal entry, about her plan to expose her father at the church anniversary. He's been controlling the narrative my whole life, I said. He controlled it during our marriage. He controlled it during our divorce. He controlled it at Jasmine's first funeral. I'm done letting him tell the story. This time I'm going to tell the truth, and I'm going to do it in front of every person he's ever lied to. Detective Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. If you're going to do this, we need to do it right. I'll be there, plain clothes, ready to make an arrest if he tries anything. And you need to time it perfectly. Let him dig his own grave first. Let him say everything he's going to say. And then you pull out the evidence. That's exactly what I was thinking. All right, Webb said. Let's plan it out. Every detail. This is going to be the most important day of both our lives. He was right. It was. We spent the next 3 weeks preparing. Minister Thompson agreed to officiate the memorial instead of Raymond, a small concession that Raymond accepted because he wanted to be free to deliver the main eulogy without having to run the whole program. We loaded all the evidence onto a USB drive that could connect to the church's video system. Financial records, text messages, photos, Jasmine's journal entries, everything. Destiny prepared her statement. She was terrified but determined. She'd written out what she wanted to say and practiced it until she could get through it without breaking down. I picked out my outfit carefully. A white dress, Jasmine's favorite color on me, the same color as the casket they'd put her in. I wanted Raymond to see it and remember what he'd done every time he looked at me. My grandmother went to her prayer group and asked them to pray for Monday morning, the day of the memorial. She didn't tell them what was happening, just that God was about to do a mighty work and they needed to be ready to witness it. Patricia and Angela would be in the audience, ready to support me, ready to run interference if anything went wrong. Detective Webb confirmed he'd have 2 officers positioned at the exits, ready to prevent Raymond from fleeing once the evidence was revealed. The night before the memorial, I sat in Jasmine's room one last time. I held her volleyball jersey, smelled her pillow, looked at the photos on her wall. 16 years of memories in this small space. I'm going to finish what you started, baby, I whispered. You tried to tell the truth, and they silenced you. But tomorrow, your truth is going to shake that church to its foundation. Your daddy is going to stand in front of God and everybody and finally face what he did. I slept better that night than I had in 6 months. When I woke up on the morning of the memorial, I wasn't scared. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Raymond thought this day was going to be about him, about his grief, about his redemption. He had no idea it was actually going to be about his destruction. I got dressed in my white dress. I put on the earrings Jasmine gave me for my last birthday. I looked in the mirror and saw my daughter's face looking back at me. My grandmother took my hands and blessed me before we left the house. The Lord is with you, baby. He was with Jasmine when she tried to speak truth, and he's with you now. Go do what needs to be done. And don't you be afraid. I wasn't afraid. I was a mother. My child had been murdered, and today her killer was going to face judgment. We drove to New Hope Community Church in silence. 3,000 people were waiting inside, and Raymond had no idea that his entire world was about to collapse. New Hope Community Church looked different than I remembered. Maybe it was the banners with Jasmine's face hanging from the lampposts in the parking lot. Maybe it was the news vans setting up their equipment on the lawn. Maybe it was the thousands of cars already filling every available space. Or maybe it was because I knew this would be the last time Raymond Mitchell ever stood behind that pulpit as a free man. My grandmother squeezed my hand as we pulled into the parking lot. You sure about this, baby? There's no going back once you start. I looked at the church, at the stained glass windows and the white steeple and the perfectly manicured grounds, all of it built on lies and stolen money and broken lives. I'm sure, I said, this is what Jasmine wanted. This is what she died trying to do. I'm just finishing her mission. We found a parking spot near the back. Patricia and Angela were already there, waiting by their car. They looked nervous. Angela was clutching her purse like it was a weapon. Patricia kept scanning the crowd like she was looking for threats. "You two okay?" I asked. Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Girl, I haven't been this nervous since my first day in the operating room. Are you sure about this? Everyone keeps asking me that. Because what you're about to do is insane. In the best possible way, but still insane. You're about to expose one of the most powerful men in this city in front of his entire congregation and the local media." I nodded. "That's exactly what I'm going to do." Angela touched my arm. "Destiny is already inside. She's sitting in the back with her mother. She said she's ready to speak when the time comes." "Good. And Minister Thompson, he confirmed everything. He'll call you up to speak after Raymond finishes his eulogy. Raymond thinks it's just going to be a few words from the grieving mother. He has no idea what's coming." Detective Webb appeared beside us, dressed in a dark suit that could have been funeral attire or plainclothes police work. He looked grim and focused. "Officers are in position. I've got 2 at the main exits and 2 more outside. If Mitchell tries to run, he won't get far." "What about after?" I asked. "After I present the evidence, I'll step forward and announce that he's under investigation. That should prevent any immediate retaliation. The DA has agreed to file charges first thing tomorrow morning. By this time tomorrow, Raymond Mitchell will be in custody." I took a deep breath. 6 months of preparation, 6 months of gathering evidence, 6 months of living with the knowledge that my daughter's killer was walking free. It all came down to the next few hours. My grandmother pulled me aside. "Baby, before you go in there, I need to tell you something." I waited. "I've been praying on this for months, asking God if what we're doing is right. If vengeance isn't supposed to be his alone, and you know what he told me?" I shook my head. "He told me this isn't vengeance. This is justice. Vengeance is hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is stopping someone from hurting anyone else. What Raymond did to Jasmine, what he did to that girl Destiny, what he's been doing to his congregation for years, that has to stop. And if God uses us to stop it, then we're doing his work." She put her hands on my face the way she used to when I was a little girl. "You go in there with the Spirit on your side. You go in there with truth as your weapon, and you dare back down, not for 1 second. That man took your daughter. You take his kingdom." I hugged her tight. The woman who had raised me, who had held me through every storm, who had been my rock when the whole world felt like quicksand. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, baby. Now let's go get justice for Jasmine." We walked toward the church. The crowd parted slightly as we moved through. Some people recognized me. Whispers rippled out like waves. "That's the ex-wife. That's Jasmine's mother." I heard she blamed Pastor Raymond. "She looks good, though. Is she wearing white?" I held my head high and kept walking. The sanctuary was even more packed than I expected. Every seat was filled. People were standing in the aisles. The balcony was overflowing. Local politicians sat in the front rows. News cameras were positioned in the back, ready to broadcast everything. Jasmine's photo was displayed on the giant screens at the front of the church, a beautiful picture from her 16th birthday. She was smiling that smile that could light up any room. My heart clenched. 6 months and the pain was still fresh. Every time I saw her face, I felt the loss all over again. But I couldn't let the pain stop me. Not today. I took my seat in the 3rd row, not the front row where Raymond's new family was sitting, not right next to him where I'd have to control my expressions, just far enough to watch, just close enough to be ready when my moment came. My grandmother sat beside me. Patricia and Angela positioned themselves a few rows back. Detective Webb found a spot near the side aisle where he could see everything and move quickly if needed. The service began. The choir sang. They always did. Beautiful voices raised in harmony, singing about God's love and eternal peace. I wondered how many of them knew what their pastor really was, how many of them had suspicions but stayed silent. Minister Thompson welcomed everyone. He talked about the importance of community in times of grief. He talked about how loss can bring people together. He talked about the gift of remembrance, And then he introduced Pastor Raymond Mitchell. Raymond walked to the pulpit in his finest suit. His face was a mask of practiced sorrow. His eyes were glistening with what looked like tears. His voice was thick with emotion as he began to speak. "Brothers and sisters, we are gathered here today to remember a beautiful soul who was taken from us too soon. My daughter, my precious Jasmine." He paused to collect himself, or to perform the act of collecting himself. With Raymond, it was impossible to tell the difference. Jasmine was a light, a gift from God. She had her mother's spirit, and I like to think a little bit of her father's determination. The congregation murmured in appreciation. Some people were already crying. I sat very still, waiting, watching. Raymond continued for several minutes talking about Jasmine's accomplishments, her grades, her volleyball career, her potential. He made it sound like he'd been there for all of it, like he'd been a constant presence in her life instead of a sporadic visitor who only showed up for photo opportunities. The lies flowed so easily. He'd had a lifetime of practice. And then he turned his attention to me. "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Jasmine's mother, my former wife, Denise. She's here with us today, and I know how hard this must be for her." The congregation turned to look at me. I kept my face neutral. Denise and I had our challenges. Marriage is hard. Sometimes two good people just can't make it work. But through it all, she was devoted to our daughter. I know that in my heart. He was building up to something. I could feel it coming. But I'd be lying if I said everything was perfect. Jasmine struggled in the years after our divorce. It pained me that I couldn't be there for her as much as I wanted to be. It pained me that she grew up in a home where perhaps the bitterness of our separation affected her more than we realized. The congregation went quiet. This was new territory. Raymond had never publicly addressed our divorce before, except in vague terms about God leading him in a new direction. I've wondered these past 6 months what I could have done differently, what we could have done differently. If Jasmine had been in a more stable environment, if she'd had more support, if she hadn't been carrying the weight of her mother's pain on top of her own, would she still be with us today? My hands clenched in my lap. He was doing exactly what I knew he would do. Blaming me, rewriting history, using my daughter's death to make himself look like the victim. I don't say this to cast blame. I say this because I believe in honesty. I believe in truth. And I believe that we owe it to Jasmine's memory to acknowledge the full complexity of her life, even the parts that are uncomfortable to discuss. The congregation was hanging on every word. Some people were nodding. Some were looking at me with expressions of pity or judgment. Raymond dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. "What I know for certain is that Jasmine is with Jesus now. She's at peace. And the best way we can honor her memory is by committing to doing better, being better, loving better." He paused dramatically. "That's why I'm announcing today the Jasmine Carter Mitchell Scholarship Fund, $100,000 to help young women pursue their educational dreams. This is my commitment to my daughter's legacy. This is how we turn tragedy into hope." The congregation erupted in applause. People were on their feet. They were cheering for him, celebrating his generosity, his devotion, his grief. I sat completely still. Minister Thompson returned to the pulpit as the applause died down. "Thank you, Pastor Mitchell, for those beautiful and honest words. Before we continue, Jasmine's mother's sister Denise Carter has asked to say a few words as well." Raymond's face flickered. He hadn't approved this, hadn't been consulted, but he couldn't object without looking petty, especially after everything he'd just said about honesty and complexity. He forced a gracious smile and nodded. Minister Thompson looked at me. This was my cue. I stood up slowly, smoothed my white dress, walked up the aisle toward the pulpit. Every eye in the sanctuary was on me. Every camera was recording. Raymond stepped aside to give me the microphone, his expression carefully controlled. But I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of unease, a hint of fear. He should have been afraid. I stepped up to the pulpit and looked out at 3,000 faces, at the cameras, at the congregation that had believed Raymond's lies for so many years, and I began to speak. "Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for coming to remember my daughter. Jasmine was, as Raymond said, a light, a gift. The best thing that ever happened to me. I paused to collect myself. The emotion was real, but so was my purpose. Raymond also spoke about honesty, about truth. He said we owe it to Jasmine's memory to be honest even when it's uncomfortable, and I looked directly at him. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you the truth about Jasmine, the truth about her father, and the truth about why she was on that road the night she died. Raymond's face went pale, and I smiled, the same smile he'd seen in the front row, the smile that promised this was just the beginning. Because you see, Jasmine wasn't just my daughter. She was an investigator, a truth-teller, and in the last 6 months of her life, she discovered something about her father that she felt the world needed to know. I reached into my purse and pulled out the USB drive. She couldn't tell you herself, but I can. And I think it's time you all heard what Pastor Raymond Mitchell didn't want you to know. The sanctuary went absolutely silent. Raymond took a step toward me, his composure finally cracking. Denise, this isn't the time or place for whatever grudge you're trying to settle. This is our daughter's memorial. I looked at him calmly. You're right, Raymond. This is about our daughter. It's about what she found. It's about what she tried to tell you. And it's about why she's not here to tell it herself. I turned to Minister Thompson. Could you please connect this to the video system? The congregation deserves to see what Jasmine wanted them to see. Minister Thompson took the USB drive. Raymond grabbed his arm. Don't you dare! This is my church, my congregation. I won't let her turn this memorial into a circus. But Detective Webb was already moving down the aisle. Actually, Pastor Mitchell, he said, pulling out his badge, I think the congregation does need to see this, and so does the district attorney's office. Raymond looked at Webb, looked at me, looked at the congregation staring at him with confusion and dawning horror. For the first time in his life, Raymond Mitchell didn't know what to say. And that's when I knew we had him. The silence in that sanctuary was deafening. 3,000 people holding their breath, cameras still recording. Raymond frozen in place with his hand still gripping Minister Thompson's arm. Detective Webb standing in the aisle with his badge visible. And me, standing at the pulpit, holding a USB drive that contained every secret Raymond had ever tried to bury. Minister Thompson gently pulled his arm free from Raymond's grip and walked to the media station at the side of the sanctuary. Raymond tried to follow him, but Detective Webb stepped into his path. I'd suggest you stay right where you are, Pastor Mitchell. Raymond's face was cycling through emotions, confusion, fear, rage. His carefully constructed mask was cracking in real time, and everyone in that congregation could see it. This is my church, Raymond hissed. You can't do this here. Actually, I said into the microphone, my voice calm and clear. This is exactly where it needs to happen. These are the people you've been lying to. They deserve to hear the truth in the same place where you've been feeding them lies. The giant screens at the front of the church flickered to life. Minister Thompson had connected the USB drive. The first image appeared, a screenshot of financial records, bank transfers, account numbers, dollar amounts. I turned to face the congregation. For those of you who don't know me well, I was married to Raymond Mitchell for 11 years. I was there when he started this ministry. I worked double shifts to pay our bills while he built his reputation. And when he discarded me for a younger woman, I walked away quietly because I didn't want to cause a scandal that would hurt our daughter. I let that sink in. But my daughter didn't walk away quietly. She was braver than me, smarter than me, and in the last 6 months of her life, she discovered things about her father that she couldn't ignore. I pointed to the screen. This is what Jasmine found when Raymond gave her access to the church office. Financial records showing that over the past decade, Raymond has transferred more than $500,000 from church accounts into personal investments. Properties purchased under his wife's maiden name. Shell companies that exist only on paper. Money that you gave in faith stolen by the man you trusted to steward it. Gasps rippled through the congregation. People were looking at the screen, then at Raymond, then back at the screen. Raymond tried to speak. These are fabricated. She's lying. This is the bitterness I was talking about. She's always been jealous of what I built. I smiled. If they're fabricated, Raymond, Then why does the church's own financial software show these exact transactions? Why do the bank records match? Why has Minister Thompson confirmed that these numbers align with discrepancies he's been questioning for years? Minister Thompson stepped forward. His voice was shaking, but he spoke clearly. I've reviewed these documents. They're authentic. I've had suspicions about our financial management for a long time, but every time I asked questions, I was told to trust Pastor Mitchell's vision. I trusted. I was wrong. The congregation erupted. People were shouting, some were crying, some were demanding explanations. Raymond raised his hands, trying to regain control. Brothers and sisters, please. This is a misunderstanding. The finances are complex. There's an explanation for everything. Don't let my bitter ex-wife turn you against me with doctored documents. I clicked to the next slide. Text messages appeared on the screen. Explicit messages, romantic messages, messages that made it very clear Raymond had been having multiple affairs throughout his current marriage. These are text messages from Raymond's phone, messages to at least 3 different women in this congregation, women he counseled, women who came to him in vulnerable moments and were taken advantage of by the man who was supposed to help them. The sanctuary went quiet again, a different kind of quiet, the quiet of shame and realization. I saw women in the congregation looking at each other, looking at Raymond, some of them with recognition in their eyes, some of them with tears streaming down their faces. But those affairs, as painful as they are, aren't the worst of it. I clicked to the next slide. The profile picture of Destiny Williams appeared. Young, innocent, scared. This is Destiny Williams. She was 15 years old when Raymond Mitchell started paying special attention to her. 15. A child in his youth group, a vulnerable girl from a struggling family who was looking for guidance. The congregation was completely silent now, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Raymond groomed this child for 2 years, private meetings, secret texts, inappropriate contact, all while he stood in this pulpit and preached about morality and family values. Raymond's face had gone white. That's a lie. I never touched that girl. She's making it up. They're all making it up. A voice came from the back of the sanctuary. He's lying. Everyone turned. Destiny Williams was standing up, her mother beside her. Her voice was shaking, but her words were clear. I'm not making it up. Pastor Mitchell has been abusing me since I was 15 years old. He told me no one would believe me. He told me he would destroy my family if I ever said anything. But I'm done being afraid. She started walking down the aisle toward the front of the church. Jasmine Carter was my friend. She was the first person who believed me. She was trying to help me. She was trying to stop him, and now she's dead. Destiny reached the front and turned to face the congregation. I know I'm not the only one. I know there were others before me. And I know that if we don't stop him now, there will be others after me. He uses his position to prey on vulnerable girls. He uses God as cover for his sins. The congregation was in chaos. People were standing up, shouting questions, demanding answers. Some were heading for the exits. Some were heading toward Raymond. But I wasn't done yet. I clicked to the final set of slides. My daughter confronted her father about all of this. The night she died, she texted him. She told him she had evidence. She told him she was going to expose him. And he asked her to meet him at this church, alone, at midnight. The text messages appeared on screen. The whole exchange. Raymond asking Jasmine to come to the church. Jasmine warning that if anything happened to her, I had everything. The last text my daughter ever sent was to her father. She was on her way to meet him. 3 hours later, she was dead. I looked directly at Raymond. The police called it an accident. But Detective Webb's original investigation found that Jasmine's brake line had been tampered with. Someone cut her brakes. Someone who knew she was going to be driving that night. Someone who had motive to make sure she never got the chance to tell her truth. Raymond's legs seemed to give out. He grabbed the edge of a pew to steady himself. No, I didn't. I would never hurt my own daughter. I would never. Detective Webb stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell, your cell phone records place you near the accident scene at 1:15 a.m., 8 minutes before the crash was reported. Security footage shows you following your daughter's car after she left the church, and you were seen washing your car at 4 a.m, hours after the accident. Raymond was shaking his head, but no words were coming out. You told investigators you were home in bed that night, but the evidence says otherwise. You met with Jasmine. You argued with her. You followed her when she left, and somehow her brakes failed on a curve she'd driven dozens of times before. I stepped closer to Raymond, close enough that he had to look at me. You killed our daughter. You killed her because she was going to tell the truth about who you really are. You killed her to protect your reputation, your ministry, your lies. Raymond's eyes met mine, and in that moment I saw it. Not just fear, not just panic, guilt. The guilt of a man who knew exactly what he had done. And then Raymond Mitchell, pastor of New Hope Community Church, beloved community leader, Father of the Year, when cameras were rolling, broke down completely. Raymond collapsed onto the front pew. His whole body was shaking. His hands covered his face. The man who had commanded this sanctuary with such authority for so many years looked like a broken child. The congregation didn't know what to do. Some people were praying, some were crying, some were on their phones probably calling family members or posting to social media. The news cameras were capturing everything. Veronica Raymond's wife stood frozen in the front row. Her face was a mask of shock and horror. The two boys, too young to understand what was happening, were clinging to her legs, confused by the chaos around them. I stayed at the pulpit, watching, waiting. Detective Webb approached Raymond slowly. "Mr. Mitchell, I need you to stand up. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Raymond looked up. His face was wet with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a man watching his empire crumble. "I didn't mean for her to die." The words came out barely above a whisper, but in the silent sanctuary everyone heard them. Detective Webb stopped. "What did you say?" Raymond's voice grew stronger, more desperate. "I didn't mean for her to die. I just wanted to scare her. I just wanted her to understand that she couldn't do this. She couldn't destroy everything I'd built, everything I'd worked for." My heart stopped. He was confessing. In front of 3,000 witnesses, in front of cameras that were broadcasting to the entire city. I loosened the brake line, just a little, just enough to make her nervous, to show her that I was serious, that she needed to back off. I didn't know she'd crash. I didn't know she'd die. The sanctuary erupted. People were screaming, crying. Some rushed toward Raymond with fury in their eyes. Others fled toward the exits. The officers stationed at the doors moved to control the crowd, but I stood perfectly still. Because Raymond Mitchell had just confessed to killing our daughter, in front of God and everybody. Raymond looked at me. His eyes were wild, desperate, searching for something. Understanding, maybe. Forgiveness. As if there was anything he could say that would make this better. "Denise, you have to understand. Jasmine was going to ruin me. Everything I built over 20 years, the church, my reputation, my ministry, she was going to tear it all down over things that didn't matter." I walked down from the pulpit. Slowly, deliberately. The crowd parted to let me through. "Didn't matter. You stole from these people who trusted you. You preyed on teenage girls. You violated every vow you ever made to me, to your congregation, to God. And when your own daughter tried to hold you accountable, you killed her. I didn't mean to. You cut her brake line, Raymond. You followed her car to make sure she crashed. You watched it happen, and then you drove home and washed the evidence off your vehicle. You planned it. You executed it. And then you stood at her funeral and blamed me for her death." Raymond tried to stand, but Detective Webb put a firm hand on his shoulder. "You don't understand the pressure I was under, the expectations, everyone looking to me for answers, everyone needing me to be perfect. I couldn't let one night destroy all of that. I couldn't let my own daughter bring me down." I looked at the man I had married, the man I had loved, the man I had made excuses for year after year while he lied and cheated and stole, the man I had protected from our daughter's judgment because I thought I was being the bigger person, and I felt something I didn't expect. Not anger, not even hatred. Pity. Raymond Mitchell was pathetic, a small man hiding behind a big title, a coward who killed his own child because he couldn't face the consequences of his own choices. "You want to talk about pressure, Raymond? Let me tell you about pressure. Pressure is working 12-hour shifts while your husband cheats on you with church secretaries. Pressure is raising a child alone while the man who should be helping you is too busy building his brand. Pressure is sitting in the front row of your daughter's funeral while the man who killed her collects sympathy from a congregation he's been robbing for years. My voice was rising now. I couldn't stop it. Pressure is spending 6 months gathering evidence against a monster while you grieve. Pressure is looking your daughter's killer in the eye and not losing your mind. That's pressure, Raymond. What you had was pride, ego, the desperate need to be seen as something you never were. Raymond started crying again. Real tears this time, the tears of a man who finally understood that his life was over. Denise, please. We were married. We have a child together. We had good times. Can't you find it in your heart to understand, to forgive? I stared at him for a long moment. We had a child together, and you killed her. There is nothing to forgive. There is only justice. I turned to Detective Webb. Take him. Detective Webb nodded. He pulled Raymond to his feet and began walking him toward the exit. Other officers moved to assist, forming a protective barrier around the disgraced pastor as the congregation surged with emotion. Raymond kept looking back at me as they led him away, his eyes pleading, his mouth moving, but no words coming out. He looked smaller with every step. The man who had once commanded this room with such authority was now just a criminal being led to his fate. Veronica was screaming, "Raymond, Raymond! Tell them it's not true. Tell them you didn't do it." But Raymond couldn't tell her that, because it was true, and everyone had heard him admit it. Destiny Williams was standing near the front, her mother's arms around her, both of them crying. But there was something else on Destiny's face, something like relief, like the weight she'd been carrying for years was finally being lifted. I walked over to her. "You were so brave," I said. "Jasmine would be proud of you." Destiny hugged me. This young woman who had been victimized by the same man who killed my daughter. We held each other while the chaos swirled around us. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered. "Thank you for finishing what Jasmine started." My grandmother appeared beside me, her old hands taking mine, her eyes full of tears, but also full of light. "It's done, baby. It's done." I looked around the sanctuary, the giant screen still showing Jasmine's face, the congregation in disarray, the cameras still recording everything, the police leading Raymond out through the side door. It was done, not the grief. That would never be done. Not the loss. That would never be undone. But the truth was finally out. The man who killed my daughter was in custody. The secrets he'd hidden for years were exposed for the world to see. Jasmine's mission was complete. I looked up at her picture on the screen. My beautiful girl, 16 years old forever. She'd tried to tell the truth, and they'd silenced her. But her truth lived on, in the evidence she gathered, in the witnesses she inspired, in the mother she left behind. "I did it, baby," I whispered. "I finished what you started." The tears finally came, real tears, not the contained tears I'd been holding back for 6 months, deep shaking sobs that came from somewhere primal. Patricia and Angela surrounded me. My grandmother held me up. The sister circle that had supported me through all of this was there catching me as I finally let go. And in the chaos of that sanctuary, surrounded by the wreckage of Raymond's fallen kingdom, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night Jasmine died. Peace. Not happiness, not victory, just peace. The war was over, justice was coming, and my daughter could finally rest. The aftermath of that memorial service was like a hurricane hitting the city. Every news station led with the story: Pastor Raymond Mitchell, beloved community leader, arrested for the murder of his own daughter. Accused of financial fraud, sexual misconduct with a minor, and years of deception that shattered a congregation. The video from the sanctuary went viral within hours. Millions of people watched Raymond confess. Millions of people watched me present the evidence. Millions of people watched Destiny Williams stand up and tell her truth. The church itself went into a state of emergency. Minister Thompson stepped up as interim leader, promising a full investigation and complete transparency. Some members left immediately unable to reconcile what they'd witnessed with the man they'd followed for years. Others stayed determined to rebuild something honest from the wreckage. Raymond was denied bail. The judge determined he was a flight risk and a danger to potential witnesses. He was held in county jail awaiting trial, the same jail where he'd once done prison ministry preaching about redemption to men in orange jumpsuits. Now he was wearing that jumpsuit himself. Veronica filed for divorce within a week. She claimed she knew nothing about Raymond's crimes, though I had my doubts. But I didn't care about Veronica. My fight was with Raymond, and Raymond was exactly where he needed to be. The investigation expanded rapidly once Raymond was in custody. More women came forward. 3 became 7. 7 became 12. 12 became 23. Women who had been afraid to speak, who had been threatened into silence, who had been told no one would believe them. They saw Destiny's courage and found their own. Some of the victims were adults who had been in vulnerable situations when Raymond took advantage of them. Some were teenagers like Destiny, groomed and manipulated by a predator in pastoral clothing. All of them had stories that broke my heart and fueled my determination. The financial investigation uncovered even more than Jasmine had found. Raymond had stolen over $700,000 from the church over 12 years. Properties, investments, hidden accounts, all funded by the faithful donations of people who believed they were serving God's work. Detective Webb was vindicated. His original report about the tampered brake line was reopened and confirmed. Additional evidence was found. Raymond's DNA on the underside of Jasmine's car where he'd accessed the brake line. Security footage from a hardware store showing him purchasing tools the day before Jasmine died. A receipt for the car wash he used to clean the evidence from his hands. The case against Raymond Mitchell was airtight. His own confession in front of thousands of witnesses sealed it. His lawyers tried to argue that he'd been under duress, that the confession was coerced by the public pressure of the moment. But the video was clear. The evidence was overwhelming. The trial came 4 months after the memorial service. I sat in that courtroom every single day, front row, where Raymond could see me every time he looked up. I wanted him to remember who had brought him down. I wanted him to remember whose truth had destroyed his lies. The prosecution presented methodically: financial records, victim testimony, the brake line evidence, cell phone records, security footage, Raymond's own words from the church that day. Destiny testified. She was nervous, but she didn't waver. She told her story clearly and completely. When the defense attorney tried to suggest she was making it up for attention, she looked him in the eye and said, "I spent 2 years wishing I could forget what he did to me. Why would I make up something I'd give anything to undo?" Other women testified, one after another. Their stories were different, but the pattern was the same. Raymond identifying vulnerability. Raymond offering spiritual guidance. Raymond taking advantage. Raymond threatening consequences if they ever spoke. I testified, too, about our marriage, about his affairs, about the divorce, about Jasmine's investigation, about finding the evidence on her laptop, about the phone call the night she died. When I described Jasmine's last words to me, her voice saying, "I love you," like she was saying goodbye, I had to stop and compose myself. But I got through it. For Jasmine, for all the women he'd hurt, for the truth. Raymond's defense was weak. They tried to paint me as a bitter ex-wife fabricating evidence. But the evidence wasn't fabricated. It was documented, verified, corroborated by independent sources. They tried to suggest Jasmine was unstable, that she'd been making up stories about her father, but her school records showed a stable, high-achieving student with no history of fabrication. Her friends testified that she'd been scared but determined. Her journal entries showed a young woman trying to do the right thing. They tried to claim the confession was given under extreme emotional pressure, but 12 people had heard him. Cameras had recorded him. He'd described loosening the brake line in his own words. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, the foreman stood and read the verdicts. Guilty of vehicular homicide, guilty of tampering with evidence, guilty of fraud, guilty of multiple counts of sexual misconduct with a minor, guilty on every single charge. Raymond collapsed when he heard the word guilty. He had to be held up by his lawyers. He kept shaking his head, kept muttering no, over and over as if saying it enough times would change reality. I sat very still as the verdicts were read. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just listened as justice was finally served. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge spent 15 minutes describing Raymond's crimes: the betrayal of trust, the exploitation of vulnerable people, the ultimate sin of killing his own daughter to protect his secrets. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge said, looking directly at Raymond, "you were given a position of sacred trust. People came to you seeking spiritual guidance. Women came to you seeking protection. Your own daughter came to you seeking honesty, and you failed them all." Raymond stood with his head bowed, his expensive suit replaced by a prison jumpsuit, his commanding presence reduced to that of a broken man. "The court sentences you to 25 years to life for the murder of Jasmine Carter, an additional 15 years for sexual misconduct with minors to be served consecutively, 10 years for financial fraud and embezzlement. You will not be eligible for parole for a minimum of 40 years. 40 years. Raymond was 43 years old. He would be 83 before he even had a chance at freedom. In all practical terms, he would die in prison. He didn't look at me as they led him away. He kept his head down, his shoulders slumped. The man who had once dominated every room he entered was now just another convicted felon being processed into the system. I watched until he disappeared through the courtroom doors, and then I finally let myself breathe. It was over. The investigation, the trial, the fight for justice. Raymond Mitchell would spend the rest of his life paying for what he did to Jasmine, to Destiny, to all the women he'd victimized, to the congregation he'd robbed. I walked out of that courthouse into the sunlight. My grandmother was waiting. Patricia, Angela, Detective Webb, Minister Thompson, Destiny, and her mother. The people who had helped me survive the worst year of my life. We didn't celebrate. This wasn't a celebration. My daughter was still dead. No verdict would bring her back. But there was something, a sense of completion, of a promise kept, of a mission accomplished. Jasmine had wanted to tell the truth, and the truth had been told. Jasmine had wanted to stop her father from hurting anyone else, and he was stopped. Jasmine had wanted justice, and justice had been served. I looked up at the sky, blue and clear and endless. "I did it, baby," I whispered. "I finished what you started. You can rest now. We both can." 1 year after my daughter's funeral, I sat in her memorial garden and watched the sunrise. The garden was in my grandmother's backyard. We'd built it together in the months after the trial. A small space with flowers Jasmine loved, a bench where I could sit and think, a stone marker with her name and the words "Truth Teller" carved beneath it. So much had changed in that year. So much had been lost. But so much had been found, too. The Church New Hope community had been completely restructured. Minister Thompson led it now with a council of elders overseeing finances and a new emphasis on accountability. They'd renamed it Grace Community Church, a fresh start. They donated $50,000 to a fund for victims of clergy abuse. It wasn't enough to undo what Raymond had done, but it was a beginning. Destiny Williams had graduated from high school. She'd gotten her GED after dropping out, determined not to let Raymond's abuse define her future. She was starting community college in the fall, studying psychology. She wanted to help other survivors. "Jasmine saved me," she told me at her graduation. "Now I want to save others." The other women who came forward were healing in their own ways. Support groups had formed. Lawsuits had been filed against Raymond's estate. A documentary was in production, telling the story of how one teenage girl's courage exposed a predator hiding in plain sight. As for me, I was different now. The grief was still there. It would always be there. Losing a child leaves a hole that never completely fills, but the grief had transformed from a weight that crushed me into a purpose that drove me. I'd started speaking publicly about my experience. At first, it was just local events, women's groups, church conferences, places where people wanted to hear about surviving betrayal, about fighting for justice, about finding strength in the darkest moments. Then it got bigger. National media wanted interviews. Organizations fighting clergy abuse asked me to be an advocate. A publisher approached me about writing a book. I wasn't sure at first. My story was painful, private, raw. But then I thought about Jasmine. She hadn't kept the truth private. She'd been willing to share it with the world, even knowing the risks. How could I do any less? The book was called The Smile That Set Me Free. It told everything. The marriage, the abuse, the divorce, Jasmine's investigation, the memorial service, the trial, all of it laid out honestly for anyone who needed to hear it. The letters started coming after the book was published, hundreds of them, from women who'd survived similar situations, from daughters who'd been failed by their fathers, from mothers who'd lost children to violence, from survivors who saw themselves in my story and found strength in my survival. Every letter reminded me why I'd told the truth. Not for revenge, not for attention, but because somewhere out there someone was living through what I'd lived through, and they needed to know they weren't alone. My grandmother was still with me, 87 years old now, and still sharp as ever. Still cooking Sunday dinner, still praying every morning and every night. She'd seen me through the worst year of my life, and now she got to see me rebuild. "I'm proud of you, baby," she told me one evening while we sat on her porch watching fireflies. "You took the worst thing that could happen to a mother, and you turned it into something that helps other people. That's what strength looks like, not pretending the pain doesn't exist, using it." Patricia and Angela were still my sister circle. We had monthly brunches now. First Sunday of every month, no exceptions. We'd added new members. Destiny and her mother, a woman named Sharon who'd survived Raymond's abuse, another mother who'd lost a child to violence and found her way to our community. The circle kept growing. That was the lesson, wasn't it? We're stronger together. The isolation that predators depend on, that abusers exploit, it breaks down when women support each other, when we tell our truths, when we refuse to be silent. Detective Webb had been promoted. His persistence in the Jasmine case, even after being pressured to close it, had brought him recognition. He was now leading a special unit investigating cold cases and institutional cover-ups. He called me sometimes to update me on other cases he was working, other families getting the justice they deserved. And Raymond was in a maximum security prison 300 miles away. I'd received letters from him, requests to visit, pleas for forgiveness. I didn't read them. I didn't respond. I didn't owe Raymond Mitchell anything least of all my time and energy. He had 40 years to contemplate what he'd done. That was enough for me. Sitting in Jasmine's garden that morning, watching the sun rise over the flowers she'd loved, I thought about everything that had happened since that day in the church, when Raymond stood at the pulpit and blamed me for her death. I thought about my smile, the smile that had confused him, the smile that had promised him his judgment was coming. That smile wasn't about happiness. It was about knowing that he didn't know what I knew, knowing that his time was up, knowing that my daughter's truth was about to set everyone free. People still asked me about that smile, in interviews, at speaking events, in letters from readers. How could you smile at your daughter's funeral? How could you stay so calm while he attacked you? And I always told them the same thing, because I had work to do, because grief can wait, but justice sometimes can't, because my daughter had trusted me to finish what she started, and I wasn't going to let her down by falling apart before the job was done. The tears came later. The breakdown came later. The nights of screaming into pillows and asking God why he took my baby came later. But in that moment, in that sanctuary with Raymond performing his grief and the congregation eating it up, I had to be strong. I had to be strategic. I had to be everything Jasmine needed me to be. And I was. That's what mothers do. We carry impossible weight. We survive unsurvivable pain. We keep moving when everything in us wants to stop. Not because we're superhuman, not because we don't feel the hurt, but because our children need us, even when they're gone. Especially when they're gone. Jasmine needed me to tell her truth, so I did. And in telling her truth, I found my own. If you've stayed with me this long through all of this pain and all of this truth, I want to leave you with something, not just my story, but what my story taught me. Because I didn't go through all of this just to survive. I went through it to learn. And what I learned, I want to share with every woman listening who might need to hear it. The first lesson is this: document everything. Jasmine saved my life because she documented her father's sins. Every screenshot, every text message, every financial record. She created a trail of evidence that couldn't be denied even by a man as powerful as Raymond. If you're in a situation where someone is hurting you, where someone is lying about you, where someone is using their power against you, start documenting. Save texts, take photos, keep records. Email copies to yourself, to a trusted friend, to a cloud account no one else can access. Your truth needs evidence. The world doesn't believe women automatically. We have to prove what men deny. That's not fair, but it's real. So protect yourself. Build your case. You never know when you'll need it. The second lesson. Silence can be strategic. I spent years being quiet about what Raymond did to me. At the time, I thought I was being the bigger person. I thought I was protecting my daughter. I thought silence was the same as peace. But there's a difference between silence that protects you and silence that protects your abuser. I was doing the latter. My silence let Raymond keep building his empire. My silence let him hurt more people. However, when it came time for the confrontation, my silence became a weapon. I didn't warn him. I didn't tip my hand. I let him think he'd won. I let him dig his own grave at that memorial service. I sat in that front row and smiled while he buried himself. Know the difference. Silence can be submission, but silence can also be strategy. Learning when to speak and when to wait is one of the most powerful skills a woman can develop. The third lesson. Your children see everything. Jasmine watched her father her whole life. She saw how he treated me. She saw how he performed for the public. She saw the gap between who he pretended to be and who he really was. I thought I was protecting her by not talking about it. But she didn't need me to tell her. She observed. She remembered. She formed her own conclusions. Children are not stupid. They see the dysfunction. They feel the tension. They know when something is wrong even if they don't have words for it yet. If you're staying in a bad situation for your kids, know that your kids already know something is wrong. And they're learning that this is what love looks like. This is what marriage looks like. This is what they should expect and accept in their own lives. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your children is show them what self-respect looks like. Show them that you don't tolerate abuse. Show them that you fight for truth, even if it's hard, especially when it's hard. The fourth lesson. Find your sister circle. I would not have survived this without Patricia, without Angela, without my grandmother, without the women who held me up when I couldn't stand on my own. We're not meant to go through this life alone, especially not the hardest parts. Find your people, build your circle, nurture those relationships even when things are good, so they're strong enough to support you when things fall apart, and be that support for others. When someone comes to you with their truth, believe them. When someone needs help, show up. When someone is fighting a battle alone, stand beside them. Raymond's power came from isolation. He separated his victims from their support systems. He made them feel alone, ashamed, unable to ask for help. The antidote to that poison is community. Women supporting women. Truth-tellers, protecting truth-tellers. The fifth and final lesson. Your story matters. For years, I thought my story was shameful. I was the woman who married a monster, the woman who stayed too long, the woman who didn't see what was happening under her own roof. But my story isn't shameful. It's human. It's real. It's shared by millions of women who loved the wrong person, who believed the wrong lies, who had to claw their way back to themselves. When I started sharing my story publicly, I was terrified. What would people think? Would they judge me? Would they blame me? Some did. Some always will. But for every person who judged, there were 100 who were helped. 100 who saw themselves in my experience. 100 who found strength in knowing they weren't alone. Your story matters, not because it's perfect, not because you did everything right, but because somewhere out there, someone is living through what you've lived through. And your survival is proof that they can survive too. So that's what I've learned. Document everything. Use silence strategically. Remember that your children see everything. Find your sister circle. And never, ever be ashamed of your story. Jasmine tried to tell her truth, and it cost her everything. But her truth didn't die with her. It lived on. It brought down a predator. It freed his victims. It changed a community. Truth is like that. You can try to kill it, but it doesn't stay dead. It waits. It finds another voice. It rises again. My daughter's voice was silenced on a dark road in the middle of the night. But I picked up where she left off, and now her truth has been heard by millions. Raymond thought the funeral was his stage, his chance to perform grief, collect sympathy, and rewrite history one more time. But it became something else entirely. It became his judgment day. It became the moment when every lie he'd ever told came crashing down around him. It became the beginning of justice for Jasmine and for every woman he ever hurt. And it became my transformation. From silent ex-wife to truth-teller, from victim to warrior, from broken mother to advocate for others walking the same painful path. Raymond is in prison now. He'll be there until he's an old man if he lives that long. Every day he wakes up behind bars is a day that Jasmine's truth is still working, still protecting, still setting people free. And me, I'm still standing, still missing my daughter every single day, still crying when I hear songs she loved or see girls her age living the life she should have had, still wishing I could hear her voice one more time, but also still fighting, still speaking, still telling the truth that powerful men don't want told. My name is Denise Carter. I'm 39 years old. I was married to a monster and I survived. I lost my daughter to his violence and I made sure he paid. And if you're watching this, if you're living through something similar, if you're wondering whether you have the strength to fight back, let me tell you something. You do. The strength you need is already inside you. It's been there all along. It's in every woman who ever survived what shouldn't be survivable. It's in our blood, in our history, in the generations of mothers and daughters who endured and overcame. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are not stuck. You are a fighter, even if you don't feel like one yet. Raymond tried to destroy me, first with his affairs, then with his lies, then with the murder of our daughter. But I'm still here, still breathing, still speaking, still smiling. That smile he saw in the front row of the funeral, he thought it was madness. He thought it was denial. But it was promise. It was patience. It was power waiting to be unleashed. And now that smile is freedom. Freedom from his lies. Freedom from his control. Freedom from the fear that kept me small for so many years. Jasmine gave me that freedom. Her courage inspired mine. Her truth became my truth. Her fight became my fight. And now I'm passing it on. To every woman watching, to every mother who's lost a child, to every survivor of abuse and betrayal and injustice, your truth matters, your voice matters, your fight matters. Don't let them silence you. Don't let them shame you. Don't let them win. Rise up, speak out, smile in the face of their arrogance, and then show them what happens when they underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose and everything left to fight for. This is Denise Carter, and I'm just getting started. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Thank you for being part of a community that refuses to stay silent. If this story moved you, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear it. If you're in a situation like mine was, reach out. There's help. There's hope. There are people who will believe you and fight beside you. And if you're one of the ones who survived, who made it through to the other side, welcome. Welcome to the Sisterhood of Truth Tellers. We're glad you're here. Rest in power, Jasmine. Mama kept her promise.